So I'm here today to share with you my winter TBR, or the books I plan to read in December, January, and February, and this is my most ambitious TBR to date. I went through my Goodreads shelves and sorted my books by page count, and I'm choosing some of the largest books that I've been dying to read for way too long. Like a lot of other booktubers, I think often we're concerned about content, and so we often choose quantity over quality, and I really want to make sure that I'm getting to books that I'm really excited about, that I'm dying to read, I want to review for you all, but are going to take me a while. I read very fast, but these books are definitely going to slow me down. It means I may not be putting out review videos as often as I used to. You probably noticed it's actually slowed down the last few months, and that's on purpose. Don't worry, I'm still reading, I'm still putting out videos, but I'm going to allow myself to read some of these chunkier books, and I'm going to be focusing as well on books that are set around winter, in cold months, and things like that, so it kind of gives me those wintry feels. And I have lots of good books to talk about, some timestamps down below if you want to skip through the sections, and let's get started. First, let's talk quickly about my patron books. As you know, I have a Patreon that you can support me on. I have a Discord, and we do a book club on there based off of people's different tiers. They can help to vote or nominate different books. And so for the month of December, we got a chance to do a revival of basically getting to renominate books that had previously been selected. And the book that we landed on is The Bank by Bentley Little. I feel like he's a bit of a controversial author online. He's just very hit or miss with readers. He has a satirical style where he almost does like a commentary on different social events and different parts of society and turns them into really messed up horror stories. They don't work for everyone, but his stories work really well for me. They tend to go to some really weird, uncomfortable places, and if you know my taste in reading, that tends to be a good place for me. So this book, as you can probably tell from the title, is a bit of a satire on the banking industry and talking about the misuse and all of that. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm hoping it's going to be similar to The Consultant, which was all about the satire of the workplace and the terrible consultants that are brought in to fix everything. And so I'm looking forward to this one. I'm hoping it's not a little bit dated, because I do know it came out a few years ago and the banking scene has continued to evolve and change, but I suspect that it will still be quite timely. So looking forward to this one quite a bit. I think it's going to create some great discussion on Discord. Then in January, we have Maggie's Grave by David Sodergren, and this is an author I've read before, and I've recommended his book The Forgotten Island many times on my channel, and so I'm hoping to track down a copy of this one. The theme for the month was witches and warlocks, so I actually haven't looked at the synopsis, but I'm assuming I trust my patrons that they nominated what they were supposed to. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the witchy element in this one is. This is an indie author and one that I really think has a lot of talent for writing really solid stories that just capture my attention. So definitely hopeful for this one. As I'm going to mention again in this video, I do not read enough witchy books. Recently, someone asked me to do a witch recommendation video for Halloween, and it's a video I've been working on for way too long, but I need to read more witch books before I do that. So hopefully this one will make the list. Stay tuned. Then for February, at the time recording this, we haven't actually picked our book, but I believe it will be a science fiction one. So if you stick around and watch for updates on my channel, I'll let you know when that's selected. And then on top of that, my top tier patrons, my possessed patrons, get the opportunity to nominate one book for each of my seasonal TBRs. And then from there, I do a random number generator and one gets selected. And this one is The Gone World, which I believe is a sci-fi thriller following this detective who's investigating something and has like a sci-fi bent. I don't know much about it. I've seen it talked about on BookTube. It's been recommended to me by a friend a couple times, so I'm really glad that it nudged its way to the top and ended up getting selected this time around, because it sounds like the kind of thing I'd really enjoy, and I really just have to try it for myself. That's the problem with these TBR videos. I know you all love watching them, but until I've read the book, I can't always give you a really good picture of what it's all about. So I appreciate you sticking around. I promise I'll be back with reviews once I've read these books. Now let's move on to the dark books that I selected for myself. This is basically going to be all backlist titles, so on top of this I will be reading some new releases as they become available to me. But these are some of my priorities, whether they be horror thrillers or just something dark and messed up. The first one is one I bought myself over the summer, and that is The Historian. I believe it's a historical horror that involves vampires. It's supposed to be very gothic, and while I try to read books as soon as I buy them, I bought this one I believe in the middle of summer or right at the beginning of spring, and so I did decide to hold hold off because I just prefer to read these books when it is a little bit darker out, just because I tend to like those atmospheric reads a little bit more. I've said on my channel that I don't always love vampire stories, but I continually say that as I'm gushing about various vampire stories, so I'm hoping that this one will work for me as well. I don't think the vampires are going to be very glittery. I think it's a more grounded story that again has that historical aspect, so I'm just crossing my fingers it works for me. It's going to be very slow paced and character driven as far as I know, which can work for me or not, and we'll find out together. Next, I also want to read The Passage by Justin Cronin, as well as the entire trilogy if I enjoy it. And this, I believe, is a post-apocalyptic future that involves vampires. Again, another vampire book that has been recommended to me so many times. I've heard this author compared to Stephen King, which can be a mixed bag when it comes to my personal reading preferences, but it's such an iconic series, and I have friends that I know that adore these books and have really made me want to read it for myself. Again, it's one that I need to try. I did technically start the first book maybe 2 years ago. I kind of liked the beginning, but it was a very long book and I got distracted by something else. Story of my life. Tell me I'm not the only one who picks up books and puts them down for no good reason. So I'm going to go back to this one. I believe there is an agent. There is someone perhaps with some sort of supernatural abilities and a larger plot at work. And it sounds very epic in nature, which is a kind of horror that I've really been enjoying more of. I'd love to do a whole video recommending what I describe as epic horror, but again, I gotta commit to reading these really big chunky books and series in order to put that list together, so hopefully that one will be a one that works for me. Next is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which is a piece of dark academia, piece of literary fiction, and if you were paying attention to my TBR from last winter, it was technically on that list. And before you write me off as one of those booktubers that just makes a TBR and then completely ignores it, that is not the case here. I fully intended to read it last year because, again, kind of a dark academia book seemed perfect in the middle of winter. But I didn't request the book from my library until after I made the video and discovered that there was a 6-month hold on a copy of the book, whether I wanted it from my digital library or a physical copy. And so by the time it became available, it was July. And so I decided to postpone that hold again and try again for this winter. So I've successfully put it on hold. It is coming, and I'm really hoping I enjoyed this one. I've heard that the characters are very unlikable, but as I've found in the last few years, if you watch some of my dark fiction videos, is that my tastes are leaning more into what is kind of considered like dark literary versus the traditional horror. And so I'm hoping I'll like it. I have to try it for myself. I might completely hate it, as many people do, but the hope that it could be up my alley, given my niche taste in reading, make me want to pick it up, and I at least have to try it. I will let you know how it goes. And as I mentioned, I need to read more witch books, and so in order to do that, I decided to put The Witching Hour by Anne Rice on this TBR. And I don't know if I'm gonna get along with it. I'm still very new to Anne Rice, but I need to give it a try. If I like it, that'll be great. It's again one of the longest books on my horror TBR, so I'm very interested in giving it a try. I know she is beloved, and I'm hoping I will love it too, because again, I want to read more witchy fiction, but I don't really know where to go with that. So if you do have recommendations down below on other witchy books you don't think I've read yet, please leave a comment, because this is definitely a recommendation video that I'd love to make, but I need to do some work first. And for something a little bit different, I also want to read Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. And this is a piece of nonfiction. I believe it's a piece of narrative writing where the author documented these individuals that went and did this epic mountain climb. I really don't know too much more about it. It's one of those books that just became a crazy bestseller. It was all over different book club lists and must-read lists and so forth. And people say it's just an amazing story, especially even if you don't, like myself, read a lot of nonfiction. I do admit I'm picking this up specifically in the winter because of those kind of cold weather feels. I'm hoping it's going to be very atmospheric, but again, also have enough narrative drive to appeal to someone like myself who reads more fiction. So I'm hoping it's going to be the kind of nonfiction that works for people like me, and hopefully it kind of scratches that cold weather itch when it's blizzarding outside and all I want to do is stay inside with a fireplace on. And this might be a horrible mistake, but I decided to put Under the Dome by Stephen King on this TBR. It's one of Stephen King's longest books that I have always wanted to try out because it does have that science fiction element. It's about, I believe, a city where aliens come and put a dome over the city, which is the same synopsis as the Simpsons movie. And I I've heard such mixed things about how badly the ending of this book goes. So many people have told me I will hate it, but I still need to try it for myself. This is a book where I fully admit that I intend to start it, I don't commit to finishing it, so if it's really not working for me, I may just put it aside. I don't think that the internet necessarily needs a rant review if I'm not enjoying it to that extent, but I'm hopeful. While I always say I'm hit and miss with Stephen King, the reason I keep going back to him is, well, one, he's very prolific, so there's a lot of content there, and the fact that I've loved some of his books, and so if I love some of them, I know that there are other hidden gems out there that I haven't gotten to. So as someone who tends to enjoy the journey and care more about that than the destination, I'm hoping I'll love this book even if the ending is a complete mess, which I've heard it is. So without spoiling anything, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this book. Then we have Burial Rites by Hannah Kent, and this is a piece of dark historical fiction that is centered around true events. In Iceland, there was a woman who was the last to be, I believe, hung, and so we follow her up to the point of her execution. And it's a very compelling story. I've mentioned before that I'm very fascinated by Icelandic fiction, so I'm hoping this one will appeal to me. It's been on my radar forever because, again, it's just kind of one of those big buzzy books that kind of transcends genres. So even if I don't read a lot of historical fiction, this is one that I've had recommended to me so many times, especially because if you follow my videos, I really enjoyed Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood, which is another story of a woman who is accused of doing a thing, and then we follow them kind of after their trial has happened. So given the fact that these books have similar plots and setups, I'm hoping there will be some overlap and enjoyment. This one is one of the shorter books on my list, but one that I've been meaning to get to every single winter, so I'm hoping I'll finally change that this year. And last we have A Book of American Martyrs by Joyce Carol Oates. And admittedly, I picked out this book from their collection because it's one of the largest books by them on my TBR. It's roughly 800 pages. As I've mentioned before, I read Babysitter this last year and really liked it. And even though I previously read Zombie and wasn't a fan at the time, I do want to go back to that book at some point. I'm never saying never on there. But I'm still convinced that this author has favorite potential. And so I picked out this one just again because it was a nice chunky long one to get through. I don't know too much about it. I think it's about two families torn apart, and it just deals with a lot of dark themes. So not horror, not a traditional thriller, more literary in nature, but given my shifting taste in books, I'm hoping this will hit that sweet spot for me. And again, if you think that I'm making a mistake, if you think I should read a different Joyce Carol Oates book, let me know down below in the comments, because her book ratings on Goodreads are all over the place, lots of mixed reviews, and I really want your opinions, especially the better you know my taste. I want to hear what you think. Now let's talk science fiction, starting with some big chunky space opera. So yes, I'm finally doing it. I'm going to read Pandora's Star, as well as its sequel, both by Peter F. Hamilton. I have wanted to read their work for quite a while. At one point I was going to go ahead and read the Void trilogy, but everyone really insisted that that is more of a follow-up to these original ones. And everyone talks about Pandora's Star, but I understand that it's really meant to be read as a complete duology. So I am committing that if I read the first book, I will read the second so I get the full picture. And obviously, again, if I like them, you'll probably see Peter F. Hamilton on future TBRs. They're an author I've been recommended so many times. I've done recommendation videos myself on space operas that I enjoy, and everyone always says, where is Peter F. Hamilton? And you're not wrong. He's an author I'm horribly underread in, and this is the year, this is the TBR that I'm going to change that, because I really need to have an opinion on this author. I need to know what his books are all about. I need to know his style, his stories, and hopefully love him as much as you all do. I think I will, given my taste in these kind of books, but like I said, I gotta try them for myself. These books have been on my TBR for way too long, and this is the year to change it. Next, I want to read Limit, which is the same author who wrote The Swarm, which if you follow my channel, you'll know that I absolutely loved. And so they have one other book, also very chunky, that they have translated to English, so I absolutely want to read it. Basically, as soon as I finished The Swarm, I checked their Goodreads list to see if they had any other books, and immediately put this book on my list. But again, it's very, very long. I think it's actually longer than The Swarm, and so I saved it for this winter TBR. I know nothing of the plot, which is probably a mistake when I'm filming a video like this, but I really don't need to know anything about it. I will read whatever they put out that gets translated at this point, because I'm so obsessed with The Swarm. I've heard people say that Limit is not as good as The Swarm, but I'm okay with that. I don't need it to be as good. I just need it to be good, and hopefully it scratches a similar itch, because man, I love The Swarm. Can I not stop talking about that one on my channel? So hopefully you'll see Limit on my favorites for next year. Next, I think a lot of you are going to be excited that I'm finally getting to Hyperion, and if I like it, I do plan to continue on with get the sequels. This is again a book and a series that have been talked about all the time in my comment section. Everyone asks where it is when I put out a favorites video, things like that. And the reason I don't have it as a favorite or recommended in videos is that I haven't read it yet. So I'm going to finally remedy that. I am nervous for this one. I heard that it's kind of a Canterbury Tales retelling, and a lot of the things I hear about it don't make me feel really confident I'm gonna love it. I'll be honest, you know me, I have really niche, weird taste when it comes to books, and I don't always love the same books that everyone else does. But I will try it, I will give you an honest opinion, and I really hope I love it. So I'm nervous, but I'm gonna do it. It's about time I got around to this one. Also, I plan to reread The Three Body Problems and go on to the 2 sequels in this trilogy. I have previously read this book and reviewed on my channel in a group batch review, but I've been meaning to go back to it because I never did continue the series, and I really understand that I'm supposed to read it as a complete work and that there is so much more. I've heard everyone says that the sequels just get better and better, even though there's a bit of a shift in plot. It's a book that I definitely found very intimidating. I didn't quite understand all the science in this one, so I do admit that I was a little bit put off to continue because I felt a little bit dumb reading it. More and more I've gotten a preference to enjoy books that challenge me and make me get out of my comfort zone, do a bit of reading myself and learn something as I'm reading along. So I'm eager to get back to this one, see how my feelings about it have changed and grown as I've grown as a reader, and then also get into those other 2 books. I believe there is an adaptation coming out on Netflix that'll be out sometime over the winter months, and so I definitely would love to have these books read before I get into that. I might do some kind of coverage like a trilogy review, but I make no promises because it really depends on how much I have to say about the series, because I know a lot of booktubers are talking about the series online, and I only want to make a dedicated review if I feel I can add some to that conversation. I don't want to be copying other people's words, but having thoughts of my own that add something to the conversation. So stay tuned for this. Love to know your thoughts on the trilogy, but I think everyone on the internet already loves it. And I also want to read more Neil Stephenson, one of my favorite authors. I'm slowly working through the books I haven't read yet from them. The next one up on the slate is Diamond Age, which I previously described as cyberpunk, and then everyone told me it was not cyberpunk. This is one, again, that I meant to read last year, didn't get to it, but there is no stopping me. I will not let another winter go by. This one is high priority, and I look forward to reading it. As I mentioned, I want to do a dedicated video all about Neil Stephenson's work, but I am not done reading yet, and this is definitely one of the most iconic ones I need to tick off of my list. And finally, let's talk fantasy. Again, I want to tackle some of the chunkiest books on my list, and when it comes to fantasy, that's pretty easy because they're all really long and they all come with sequels. So the first one I think I mentioned in my fall TBR, but I'm already working on this, and that is The Wandering Inn by Pirate Abba. This is a series I found out about from Matt's Fancy Book Reviews, and he has been recommending and just loving this series. But he's one of the few booktubers I do see talking about it on YouTube because of the fact that, again, these books are incredibly long. I believe each of the volumes published is over 1,000 pages. And again, I do think booktubers have a lot of pressure to always find something new or short and kind of get a lot more content out. So I've committed that I'm going to read several of the volumes. And what I'd like to do is a dedicated individual review of the series once I'm far enough in that I feel like I have something to say. And so I am already reading through these books, but I'm not going to give you updates for every single book. I feel like it'll be a little bit more repetitive if I do it that way. So I'd rather give you a solid opinion on, is it worth it? What type of reader should pick it up? The cons, the pros, all of that. And so I'm working through it so that there's more opinions online because it's a series that is really beloved in the circles of those that read it. But I do feel like there's a lot of people who don't want to touch the series because of the length, and there's definitely mixed reviews out there. So I want to give a really honest opinion about what I like and don't like about the series and give you some opinions, thoughts, and hopefully help you to make a decision for yourself. But again, I got to do a little bit more reading because I got a few more books to go. Next is 1Q84 by Murakami, and this is one of these really popular, iconic, literary speculative books that is part fantasy. I've heard it described as being a little bit science fiction. My understanding is that it's set in a world that is like ours, but then possibly things start to shift and change and realities start to blend together. But I believe it's done in more of a magical realism kind of way rather than like a time traveling, multiverse shifting type type of angle is the way that it's presented to the reader. This book is super controversial. I have watched videos where people rip it apart. It's supposed to be very chauvinistic and not have the best female representation. As a female reviewer, you've heard on my channel before that I probably have a higher tolerance than other reviewers when it comes to the objectionable content, so I don't think that's going to scare me away. I could be wrong, I could be super offended, but I'm very hopeful for this one. I did buy myself a copy, which I don't always do for a book that's unread, but it sounds really amazing, and with a longer book it helps to own a copy so I can take my time with it. So this is one I definitely want to check out. I bought it a while back with the intent of reading it this winter, so this is another one that is 100% going to happen, and I look forward to sharing my thoughts. Good or bad, you'll find out with me. And I also want to read this winter His Dark Materials, the series that starts with The Golden Compass. This is a case where I know absolutely nothing about it. I never read it growing up. It wasn't a controversial thing in my family. I think for other people there's like religious overtones or something that has made this book kind of in the Harry Potter category where some people love it or hate it and all of that. But for me, it just wasn't part of my childhood experience. I know nothing about it, never seen any adaptation. And so I just want to try it out. And again, I know it's centering around the winter months, or at least the first book is. I think it has a Polar Express, but that might be a separate book, so ignore me. I will read it and come back and let you know what I think about it. I don't read a lot of children and middle grade fiction, but this is one that I just feel like is a glaring gap in my childhood that I kind of want to remedy now. I also want to read more N.K. Jemisin, and I think I'm going to go with the Inheritance trilogy. If you follow my channel, you know that I love the Broken Earth trilogy. It's one of my favorites, and I haven't read much of her other full-length novels. And I've kind of started and stopped a few before, but I think I'm going to go with this one. I don't know too much about it. It's set in a world that is brutal, lots of adult content, terrible things happening to terrible people and people who don't deserve it. And I'm really looking forward to it. I definitely have to be in the right mood for her work because, again, it's not fun, it's not entertaining like other things, but it's one I gotta try, and I'm hoping I enjoy it. So I think I'm gonna go with that one. If you think I should go with the Dreamblood duology instead, definitely drop a comment and try to sway me. And I also want to read Ninth Reign by Jen Williams. This is an epic fantasy trilogy that is become a booktube darling, and again, it's one that I don't really know much about. I know booktubers like Elle Brooks has just loved this, and so many other booktubers have jumped on board and called it an all-time favorite. It's one that I'm really curious about because while it's very beloved in the circle that it's read, it still feels a little bit more underhyped. It doesn't always show up on the best fantasy books of all time list, but the people who've read it are very passionate about it, so that makes me interested to try it out. And again, once I've read it, I can come back and give you a better synopsis, so stay tuned. And finally, I want to read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I think you know this one is a very popular book and series online, but I believe it involves a set of worlds where there are alternative versions of what we know as Britain. And so it's a book where the characters can kind of travel through portals to these other worlds, and they have different shades and so forth of color involving in there. I'll be honest, I kind of want to read the first book because I've heard the second book involves pirates, and I want to do a pirate recommendation video in the future. So I'm hoping I like it. Sometimes I'm a little bit hit or miss when it comes to these super popular authors, and I do enjoy reading more hidden gems, but I also like to have an opinion on the popular stuff, so I'm going to do both. And this is a series that I've had on my radar off and on for quite a while, and it's about time I gave it a try, see what I think, and again, I'll get back to you. Good or bad? We'll find out together. Can I say that enough? So that's it for this video here. I'd love to know the books I talked about. Which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? Let me know what you have planned for your own TBR this winter. And again, I'd love all the opinions. If you think that I'm picking up the wrong books, if you think I'm making a horrible mistake with any of these choices, let me know, and we'll talk more in the comments. If you're new to my channel and you like the kind of books that I like to read, do consider sticking around and subscribing. I do read a lot of horror, thriller, science fiction, fantasy, and other dark things. If you want to help me out with this video, you can give me a big thumbs up. You can drop a comment, even if it's just an emoji like a stack of books or a snowflake or something wintry like that. And if you want to hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss these videos from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.